Al-Hakam I, who ruled from 796 to 822, was the complete opposite of his predecessor, a drunkard and a lover of poets and Slavic eunuchs, a collector of books and severed heads. According to exaggerated chroniclers, there were more than 6,000 women and boys in his harem. And when Cordoba rebelled against his taxes in 818, in the famous Revolt of the Rabad, Al-Hakam ordered something that no one would ever forget. 3 days of looting, 300 crosses along the riverbank, and 22,000 Cordobans deported to Alexandria and Crete. From then on he was called Al-Rabadi, the one from the Rabad district. Yet he was also the first great patron of Andalusian culture. He founded the first public library in Western Europe. He bought books in Baghdad and Cairo, and brought the finest musicians from Medina and Damascus. The poetic genre of the Mawasha was born at his court, the first romantic poetry written in Arabic letters, and the Zajal, sung in taverns by women who did not wear veils. Then came Abd al-Rahman II, who ruled from 822 to 852, the most elegant emir in history. He dressed in red silk, perfumed himself with musk and amber, and loved music more than any other ruler. His palace in Medinat al-Zahra had not yet been built, but he already dreamed of it. He brought from Medina a singer named Kalam, whose voice was said to make even camels weep. According to the poet Ibn Abd Rabah, Abd al-Rahman II introduced the fashion of weeping for camels into Al-Andalus. Slavic eunuchs, known as the Sakaliba, fair-haired youths bought in Verdun and castrated in Al-Andalus, served in the palace. Some rose to become generals and viziers. The most famous was Muhammad ibn Abd al-Karim al-Iklimi, who eventually governed the frontier of Zaragoza. But this was also the era of the voluntary martyrs of Cordoba. Between 850 and 859, 48 Christians, mostly children of mixed marriages, entered the mosque to publicly insult the Prophet. They wanted to die as martyrs, having watched their brothers convert to Islam out of fashion or personal interest. Muslim judges tried to declare them insane in order to save their lives, but they persisted. One by one they were beheaded. Emir Muhammad I, grandson of the previous ruler, closed newly built churches and banned public executions so that the scandal would not be repeated. Meanwhile, in the north, the Christians began to organize. In 844, an Asturian noble named Ramiro I defeated a Cordoban army at Clavillo, a battle probably invented later, but one that became legendary. In 859, Ordoño I of Asturias captured Leon and began the resettlement of the Duero region. Cordoba responded with acifas. Every summer, an army marched north to burn crops and villages, no longer conquering territory, but merely punishing. In 886, a 17-year-old boy ascended the throne. His reign lasted only 2 years. He was poisoned by his brother, Abdallah, who ruled from 888 to 912 amid total chaos. This was the era of the great rebels. Umar ibn Hafsun, a Muladi of Visigothic origin, rose in Bobastro in Malaga and seized control of half of southern Al-Andalus. He converted to Christianity. He allied himself with the Abbasids and even with the Fatimids of Ifriqiya. Abd Allah was forced to negotiate with him 3 times. When Ibn Hafsun died in 918, his son brought his body to Cordoba to have it buried as a Muslim, thus saving the family. In Seville, the Banu Hayj proclaimed themselves independent. In Toledo, the Muladies resisted for 30 years. In the Ebro Valley, the Banu Qasa even minted their own coins bearing the name of Muhammad. Al-Andalus seemed on the verge of disintegration. Then, in 912, a 21-year-old young man rose to power, one who had grown up watching his grandfather and father humiliated by rebels. His name was Abd al-Rahman ibn Muhammad, and he would become known as Abd al-Rahman III, al-Nasir li-Din Allah, the one who makes God's religion victorious. During the first 16 years of his reign, he crushed every rebellion one by one. Ibn Hafsun's stronghold at Bobastro was finally defeated in 928. When Abd al-Rahman entered the fortress, he found the rebels' embalmed body still seated on its throne, dressed as a Christian monk. He ordered it beheaded and the head sent to Cordoba in a cage. And in 929, when not a single enemy remained within his borders, Abd al-Rahman made the decision that would change history forever. He proclaimed himself caliph. He was no longer a mere emir, independent of all others. He was the successor of the Prophet. Just like the Abbasid in Baghdad and the Fatimid in Ifriqiya, Cordoba ceased to be merely an important city. It became the capital of a caliphate. The golden age of the emirate had ended. The golden age of the caliphate had just begun. The year was 929. Cordoba awoke wrapped in a silver mist that the rising sun slowly dissolved above the Guadalquivir River. From the tower of the great mosque, the muezzin called to prayer, and his voice echoed through streets already boiling with life. Syrian merchants unloaded rolls of silk. Circassian slaves watered courtyards with copper pitchers. A rabbi debated with a Muslim jurist beneath the shade of an orange tree, while blue-eyed Slavic eunuchs walked by escorting a favorite of the caliph. At the center of all this, in the throne hall of the Alcazar, a 40-year-old man stood up. He had fair skin, green eyes, and a beard dyed with henna. He wore a black tunic embroidered in gold with verses from the Quran. His name was Abd al-Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Abd Allah, and he had just proclaimed himself caliph. Heralds roamed the streets crying out, "Allah has granted victory to his servant Al-Nasir Lead-in Allah, commander of the faithful." From that day on, Cordoba ceased to be merely a city. It became a legend. Over the next 80 years, from 929 to 1008, Al-Andalus experienced its most prosperous, dazzling and fragile period. Abd al-Rahman III al-Nasir ruled for 50 years. In those 5 decades he did not lose a single major battle. He reconquered Toledo in 932, Zaragoza in 937, and forced the Christian kings to pay pariahs, tributes in gold and slaves. When Ramiro II of Leon refused to pay, Al-Nasir marched north with an army so vast that, according to the chroniclers, the spears looked like a moving forest. At Simancas, in 939, the Christians achieved a Pyrrhic victory. But the caliph returned the following year, and devastated everything as far as Santiago de Compostela. There he ordered the bells of the cathedral to be carried on the backs of captured Christians to Cordoba, to be hung as lamps in the mosque. Yet Al-Nasir's true obsession was not war but beauty. 6 kilometers from Cordoba, he ordered the construction of Medinat al-Zahra, the radiant city. 3,000 workers labored for 10 years, raising 10,000 columns of pink marble from Almeria, green marble from Greece, and black marble from Africa. Mercury fountains reflected light like liquid mirrors. One hall had a ceiling of solid gold and silver, with a pearl the size of a dove's egg hanging at its center, a gift from the Byzantine emperor. When the envoy of Emperor Otto I of the Holy Roman Empire arrived in 956, it is said he fell to his knees and wept upon seeing the city, for nothing in Europe compared to it. Cordoba may once have reached a population of 1 million, a figure debated yet accepted by many modern historians. 700 mosques, 300 public baths, 100,000 oil lamps lighting the streets each night. An aqueduct bringing water from mountains 30 kilometers away, and books. The Caliphal Library held 400,000 volumes at a time when the Abbey of St. Gall, the largest Christian library in Europe, possessed only 600 books. Its catalog alone filled 44 volumes. Women copyists were employed and paid as state officials. A Christian traveler wrote, "In Cordoba, even the shoemakers argue about Arabic grammar." When Al-Nasir died in 961, he left behind a realm at peace, a full treasury, and a son prepared to rule. That son was Al-Hakam I, the great bibliophile, who ruled from 961 to 976. He never left Cordoba in his entire life. He spent his days reading and acquiring books, sending agents as far as Baghdad, Cairo, and Samarkand. It is said that when a new book arrived, he would suspend audiences to read it. Yet he was also a stern ruler. When the Fatimids of Ifriqiya attempted to invade the Maghreb, he sent a fleet that crushed them, and when the Normans sailed along the Atlantic and raided the coasts in 966, he pursued them until none remained alive. Al-Hakam died without a legitimate adult male heir. His favorite concubine, a Basque woman named Sub, had given him 2 sons. The eldest, Hisham, was only 11 years old. And then appeared the man who would change everything. Muhammad ibn Abi Amir was poor, handsome, ambitious, and ruthless. A student at the University of Cordoba, he became the lover of Sub, the mother of the future caliph, and within a few years rose from scribe to treasurer, then to general, and finally to Hajib, the equivalent of a prime minister. Everyone called him Al-Mansur Billah, the one made victorious by God, and victorious he was. In 50 military campaigns, Al-Mansur devastated the Christian kingdoms of the north. He captured Barcelona in 985, destroyed Leon, ravaged Coimbra, and in 997 he marched once again to Santiago de Compostela. This time he did not settle for carrying off the bells. He destroyed the cathedral entirely and forced Christian captives to rebuild it stone by stone in Cordoba as a trophy. Christian kings called him the Scourge of God. Muslims called him Sa'id, meaning Lord. He built for himself a new palace city, Medinat al-Zahira, meant to eclipse Medinat al-Zahra. But Al-Mansur died in the year 1000, either on the battlefield of Calatanyazor or of illness in Medina Celi, according to differing accounts. He was buried with dust from all his campaigns sewn into the pocket of his robe. With him died the last great golden age of the caliphate. His son Abd al-Malik continued his work for a few years, but it was already too late. The army was filled with Berber mercenaries who hated the Andalusi population. The Slavic palace slaves plotted. The legitimate Umayyad heirs waited for their moment. 6 years after Al-Mansur's death, Cordoba rose against his grandson. For 3 days the crowds looted Medinat al-Zahra. The pearls of the throne hall were trampled into the mud. The once radiant city was reduced to ruins that can still be visited today. The caliphate, jewel of the world, collapsed like a house of cards. The Golden Age had lasted exactly 80 years, and the Andalusi apocalypse began. Cordoba, the year 1009. The air smelled of smoke and old blood. Streets that 10 years earlier had been lit by 100,000 lamps now lay dark and strewn with corpses. In the plaza of the Alcazar, the head of the last legitimate caliph, Hakam II, hung impaled on a pike. He was 27 years old and had been dead for 4 days. What began as a dispute over the throne became a war of all against all, one that would last 23 years and leave Al-Andalus in ruins. It began when the great clans of Cordoba, weary of the sons of Al-Mansur, rebelled. On the 23rd of February, 1009, a mob stormed the palace and dragged the young caliph Hakam II from his bed. They forced him to abdicate and installed a distant cousin in his place, Muhammad II al-Mahdi. He was the first caliph who commanded nothing. He was a puppet. The Berbers, who had been the shock troops of Al-Mansur, saw their chance and backed another Umayyad claimant. The Slavic palace slaves supported a third. The native Andalusians, old Arabs and Mullads, split among all sides. In just 3 years there were 5 different caliphs, all bearing the same Umayyad name, all murdered or deposed. Muhammad II al-Mahdi lasted 2 years. He was overthrown by a man named Sulayman al-Mustain, who entered Cordoba in 1011 with 10,000 Maghrebi horsemen. For 3 days the city was mercilessly looted. Women in the palaces were raped upon the very carpets where lutes had once been played. Medinat al-Zahra, already wounded, received its death blow. It was burned alive. Even today, pieces of marble melted by the heat are found among its ruins. Sulayman ruled for 5 years. In 1015, the people of Cordoba, led by a new pretender named Abd al-Rahman IV, defeated him and beheaded him. His head was carried through the streets in an iron cage. And so it continued. Between 1009 and 1031, Al-Andalus had 12 caliphs. Most ruled for mere months, some were children, others were old men pulled from prison. One was a black slave purchased for the occasion. Palaces became slaughterhouses. Eunuchs changed masters weekly. The most beautiful concubines, queens yesterday, were sold in the slave markets the next day. As Cordoba bled, the rest of the land fractured. In every major city, an independent kingdom arose. The Taifas. In Zaragoza, the Banu Hud of Yemeni origin proclaimed themselves kings. In Toledo, the Banu Dilmun Berbers did the same. In Seville, the Abbadids, pure-blooded Arabs, turned the ancient capital of the Guadalquivir into a court of poets and assassins. In Granada, the Zurids, Berbers from North Africa, built the Alhambra upon the Red Hill. In Badajoz, the Aftasids. In Valencia, the Emirs. In Almeria, the Sumadids. In Malaga, the Hammadids, who even proclaimed themselves caliphs, claiming Umayyad blood. In total, more than 30 taifas, great and small, rich and poor, Arab and Slavic, all hated one another, and all feared the only remaining power to the north, the Christian kingdoms. For while the Muslims slaughtered one another, the Christians advanced. Alfonso V of Leon captured Viseu, Sancho III the Great of Navarre was crowned Emperor of all Spain and held Castile. Bermudo III of Leon died in battle against the Navarrese. The Counts of Barcelona began extracting tribute from the Catalan taifas. In Cordoba, the former capital of the caliphate, no one remained who could truly be called caliph. The last, Al-Hakam III, was deposed in 1031. The leading citizens of the city gathered in the Great Mosque and made a historic decision. Enough of the Umayyads, enough of caliphs. Cordoba would become a republic ruled by its own citizens. It was the first and only Islamic republic in history. It lasted exactly 2 years. In 1033, the civilians under Al-Mu'tadid, the most ruthless and cunning of the Taifa kings, entered Cordoba, looted it one final time, and reduced it to a secondary city. The great mosque remained closed for months, the Guadalquivir filled with corpses drifting toward the sea. When the dust settled, the caliphate that had once been the wonder of the world no longer existed. In its place stood 30 small, wealthy, cultured, and weak kingdoms. Kingdoms that paid tribute to Christians to avoid attack. Kingdoms that warred with one another over villages or famous poets. Kingdoms that built palaces of dreams while their borders crumbled. Chroniclers called these years fitna, discord, the time when the Muslims of Al-Andalus lost their heads and with them the paradise they had built. In just 23 years, the most powerful state in Western Europe had destroyed itself. And in the northern mountains, an Asturian Leonese king named Alfonso VI smiled, for the Reconquista was no longer a dream, but only a matter of time.